Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Let's Talk primary session. We are just expecting a few more people, so we're just going to give it a couple more minutes. You've just got time to grab a cup of tea before you sit down and listen to us. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Let's Talk primary session. Great to see so many of you here. Thank you so much for giving up an hour and a half of your evening to come along. I'm sure that you're going to find tonight's content helpful. My name's Emma Stevens from the Safety and Resilience Consultancy, and with my colleague Chloe Pope, we're going to be facilitating tonight's session. And our Safety and Resilience Consultancy is a partnership which was set up to support you with the challenges of looking after your children in what feels like an ever-changing landscape at times. So with this amount of people on the Teams platform, it can make our IT a bit temperamental. So you will see that your cameras and your mics are muted. This does also mean that, unfortunately, Chloe and I cannot respond to any raised hands during tonight's session. But the chat bar is open, so please do put any comments or questions in. This is a great way to support each other. If you've used a service before or you've got some tools that have worked for you, please do share this information with everyone. However, we all know that every family is different, so because something worked for somebody else doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. And also, we are aware that services are very stretched and that you may not always have had the response and support that you felt you needed. However, please do try tonight and keep the chat positive. We want this to be a safe, caring space for you all to support each other. And for us, sometimes it can be difficult to present tonight's session and give appropriate answers. You know, there may be a question that needs a little more thought rather than a quick public reply. If that's the case, please be assured that we won't be ignoring your question and we will come back to you by email. Please be respectful of each other, and for confidentiality reasons, do not give names or identifying features of your children. The session tonight will be recorded, but your names and comments in the chat bar will not be visible to anybody watching this recording back. And finally, there is going to be a toolkit that will accompany these sessions, and these will be sent out to you after the session. We have run these sessions previously for parents and carers of teenagers and for our nearly teenagers, but this is our first session around little ones. So some of the content we share tonight might be difficult for you to hear, and we can't apologise for this because it is important that you know what your children are facing. But one positive of being at home and listening remotely on the sofa is that you can mute us, pause us if you're watching the recording, take a break, and when you return, we may have moved on. And this is a great way of being able to look after yourselves. Being responsible for growing humans is hard work, and to do a good job of this, you really need to look after yourselves. And one very last housekeeping comment, we really encourage you to share and talk about what you hear over the next 2 weeks with your children. But a lot of the content you might need to think about before you share. So tonight is not really suitable for your children to listen to. So please do sit somewhere where they can't hear, or pop some headphones in. So these sessions are not about telling you how to be the perfect parent. That person doesn't actually exist, but we're here to make you aware of some of the risks and issues that you might come up against. As professionals, Chloe and I go on lots of training and lots of awareness events, but we're always kind of very aware that the people who support children the most, you as parents and carers, are not given the same amount of information. You might well be sitting here tonight looking at this agenda and thinking that a lot of tonight's content doesn't apply yet to your family, but we cannot stress enough about how these sessions are about you having information and knowledge to prepare your family. You need to protect them and be prepared for the dangers in our communities that might be coming your way. Statistically, 86% of you here tonight have children who own a phone, and there are huge risks around this, which we're going to explore a little bit further. 2,000 under 12s were arrested last year. That's an average of 6 children a day. And those crimes range from assault with a knife to shoplifting and drug dealing. And when we look at community pressures, we're going to be exploring how easy it is for our children to fall prey to these predators. So as you can see, we're going to be covering quite a lot in these 2 evening sessions. Tonight, we're going to be looking at some of those basic physical and brain developments that means your child is changing very quickly, and that the way they see and respond to the world is changing too. We're going to be looking at county lines and other forms of exploitation, and we're going to have a brief look at the dangers to your children from drugs and alcohol. We're going to be looking at worries when your child is online, so things like social media, pornography and grooming. And we are going to look at just how hard it is to be aged 5 to 9 and what causes worries and anxieties to your children. And we're going to end positively about what you can really do at home to help your family. So we want to start by asking you to sit back for just 3.5 minutes and think about how fast life goes. Think back to your child or children being babies and how much they've changed already. We really need to enjoy and celebrate them being this age, because it doesn't last very long. And this clever little time lapse is going to show you just how quick it is. Now do bear with us, because some of our clips are taking a little while to start playing tonight, but hopefully they're going to work. I love that. I really wish I'd thought to do it with my children. But the point we're trying to make here is how fast that time goes. I mean, your children are probably already going to school. So we're just going to quickly cover what you may or may not be seeing at this stage with your children. Remember, we're talking about the average child here. Well, average, are we? Average in children doesn't really exist. No one's child here tonight could be classed as average. Children are all totally unique, but there will be a few common things that you may see in these special years. So physical growth at this age tends to happen in spurts, but progresses at an overall steady pace. So most children are going to gain an average of about £7 and maybe 2 inches each year. So the trousers that fitted at the start of term are probably not going to fit again by Christmas. You're going to see the loss of those baby teeth and their replacement by permanent teeth. And this is one of the most dramatic signs of physical development for this age group. Their face changes shape, doesn't it, so much as they lose their teeth. They often lose and replace about 4 baby teeth a year during this time. So that's lots of tooth fairy visits. They're going to start to make major gains in things like muscle strength and coordination. And most children within this age range are going to start really developing those basic motor skills. So the kicking, the catching, the throwing, and they're going to become more skilled at the complex activities such as dancing, shooting a basketball, or maybe things like playing the piano. And from around the time that they start school, most of your children are becoming far less egocentric. So they're beginning to see things from another person's perspective. They're also becoming more social, so they start to adopt a more social worldview, becoming more genuinely interested in others and the world around them. They start to become more interested in friendships, and they can probably name 1 or 2 friends now. Although these friendships do tend to be opportunistic and they can change frequently, especially we find with girls, their best friend 1 minute and then their enemies the next. And they're also beginning to understand that not everybody sees the world in the same way that they do, because they're going to start meeting more people from outside the family or outside of your friendship groups. And hopefully they're going to start being able to demonstrate that ability to take turns and to share. However, these new abilities can start to break down under pressure. So children of this age still need a lot of supervision and guidance from you. It's normal at this stage for children to start using their developing language skills, especially to interact socially. They're going to start asking questions of other people, and they're going to start to lead their own imaginative play a little bit more, rather than just demand things from you, their adults. That's going to come back again, isn't it, when they approach their teens? They're increasingly interested in the world around them, and their questions become more and more frequent. Children at this age can more reliably distinguish between what is imaginary and what is real. Not always, and they're still going to enjoy engaging in that make-believe. For example, a child at this age might play more cooperatively and interactively with friends, as opposed to that parallel play that we've seen when they were younger. And in their play, they're more likely now to allocate roles to themselves and their friends. They're going to be acting out characters from books, television, and movies. You might find yourself sitting down a lot watching plays that they put on as they play out little characters and scenarios. So generally, children who are in this age group, between 5 and 9, are going to agree to follow the rules at home and at school, although they might expect now to start to have input about the fairness of rules. So this is where you can try thinking about your family being a team and you being the manager. So everyone needs a say, but it's still you who has the final decision making. Again, a really good rule to set when you start having teenagers in your home. Children are beginning at this age to develop their own internalized sense of right and wrong, that sense of conscience, but they may need support to consistently apply this in situations from you. You're going to get a lot of why when you ask them to do something or you tell them about something. You're going to get why. Why does that happen? So what worries them? What causes your children to be anxious or nervous? Well, when we talk about stress, we tend to think of it as being an adult problem, don't we? Juggling a difficult job, money and relationship worries, or just that feeling of having too much to do at any one time. And that makes us think about stress and anxiety in a very big and adult way. But stress isn't so different to that for our children. So your child's growing understanding of the world around them at this age can lead to some new fears and anxieties. For example, they might be afraid of your criticism. They might be afraid of who they're going to sit next to at lunch. They might be scared of physical harm or threat from friends at school. Or they might be scared of supernatural things like ghosts and other weird things under their bed. And stress can also be a response to a negative change in the child's life. So although children are forming friendships outside of the family at this age, the family is still the central influence in a child's life. Therefore, anything that influences or upsets that family structure, dynamic, or routine is going to impact on your children. So in small amounts, stress can be good. We don't actually want to be wrapping our children up in cotton wool. But excessive stress can really affect the way that a child thinks, acts, and feels. Children learn how to respond to stress as they grow and develop. And although at this age children can express these worries and feelings, they might need a bit more time to identify and talk about some of those tricky emotions that they feel. They often have little control over these big feelings, and they're going to have some unexpected outbursts of anger and sadness. Less so than when they were toddlers and they didn't have the language to share, but you're still going to see these outbursts quite frequently as they really battle and come to terms with new situations. So what might you see if your child is feeling stressed or anxious? So Chloe's just going to make you aware now of some of the common behaviours. You know your child, you spend a lot of time with them. So what we're really looking for here is changes in their usual behaviour and presentation that lead you to think that they're worried. Chloe.
Thank you, Emma, and good evening, everyone. So here we're really thinking being moody or irritable. This age group will be starting to be more aware of the unusual or stressful times that their family may be in. So they may fear for their family, for example. They may fear because developmentally they're gaining that ability to consider another person's perspective. It could present as worries about their grandparents being old, or maybe hearing you and your partner arguing. And they may release these fears as anger or irritability. This state of being on edge is part of our hardwired fight, flight, or freeze response. Absolutely no different for adults or for children. But the word stress is often not a familiar word for children. It could be that they express distress with words like worried, confused, annoyed, or angry. Sometimes it comes across in what they say about themselves or the situation, for example. This can include that negative self-talk, such as I'm so stupid or nothing is fun anymore. They may alter their behaviours based upon the setting. So, for example, seeming absolutely fine within school, but using these coping mechanisms more and more at home when they often feel safer. Frequent crying during times of extreme stress and anxiety is common in both adults and in children. It really is our body's way of helping us to detoxify the body, ease pain, and restore that emotional balance. Researchers have also established that crying releases oxytocin and endorphins. So these real feel-good chemicals help to ease both that physical pain and that emotional pain. Children also know that this kind of crying will make them feel heard. So at this age, it is hard to ignore a crying child. It's clear that something is wrong. And as parents and carers, we will respond to a crying child. So our children learn that it is a good way of getting our attention, but that doesn't mean that we should ever ignore them or ignore the crying. Physical signs. So young school-aged children often show their emotional stress in physical ways. So complaints of tummy aches or their tummy's hurting really can be a common reaction. And this really does have some truth to it. So when we're stressed, our bodies make chemicals that have those real physical effects. Again, back to our body's fight, flight, or freeze system, that real surge of hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. Our guts also have their own nervous system, and basically these systems and hormones can make our stomachs feel a bit funny or make our stomachs feel sore. Additionally, stress lowers the pain threshold. So when a child is stressed, often this will result in aching bones, tummy aches, and headaches. So they're all real physical symptoms. In our toolkit, which you will be getting emailed a copy of soon, is a body map exercise, which really helps young children to name the feelings that they have within their bodies. It just involves finding some leftover wallpaper in the garage and drawing around your child's body to create a life-size drawing of them. You can then have some fun together creating your child. So really good for giving body parts those correct names, which we will talk about later next week. You might find that they're always wanting to be with you. So if they're scared or have picked up that something is maybe wrong at home, not quite right, they might not want to leave you. If the last thing they heard before school was an argument between you and their older sister where you shouted, "You wouldn't even notice if I was here, I may as well run away to the circus," your little one may really believe that that is an option and not want you to leave, as hey, you might not be there to pick them up after school. The next few symptoms can all roll into one when we start to think about them. So children with anxiety at bedtime usually struggle to fall asleep and can lie awake for hours, really. They often might reappear numerous times in the evening with excuses such as being hungry, being thirsty, too hot, too cold, needing the toilet. You take them back to bed, but in no time at all, they're back with yet more excuses, just like when they were toddlers. Children with bedtime anxiety may be worriers. They might not be aware that they feel anxious. Your child probably cannot verbalise this worry. They may just have a sense that something bad is going to happen or they're going to be in trouble for something. The same with food. Children under stress may revert to the easy comfort foods that they used to love and reject those more adult, exciting foods that they've begun to enjoy. At this point, we probably need to touch on bullying. Absolutely none of us like to think about our children being unhappy, and bullying can be a major cause of unhappiness. You, as parents and carers, have a vital role to play in supporting a child who may be at risk of being bullied. You can help identify and monitor incidents of bullying behaviour, but can also be called upon to talk about and use anti-bullying strategies with your child at home. So bullying can be broken down into 4 general areas. So we have verbal abuse. So this would include things like name calling, saying hurtful things, spreading rumours, or nastily laughing at the person who's being bullied. Then we have physical abuse. So that would include any kind of physical violence, such as punching, hitting, kicking, hair pulling, spitting, or any kind of non-consensual sexual touch. Emotional abuse. So this type of bullying is much more of the kind of mind games type of abuse. So making the child who's being bullied feel uncertain as to where they stand, maybe being very overly friendly one day and then totally ignoring or giving the silent treatment the next. Exclusion from a group altogether would also fall under this category. Then we have online abuse, so definitely a type of bullying that really is on the rise more than ever now to really how accessible it is. We will come back to online abuse a little later, but just think for a minute about your school days. You can't make a choice at 7 years old about whether to go to school or not. You have to go, and that can be so stressful if school for you is not a nice experience. So how will you know if your child is being bullied? Bullies can make children feel isolated and afraid of the repercussions if they speak out or seek help. It can also be difficult to know if your child is being bullied, but there are some signs alongside the others that you can look out for. So firstly, think about that change in behaviour. They might become much louder, for example, or they might become much more reserved and quieter. They might appear quite frightened and fearful to go into school or take part in their usual activities or clubs. They might present with several unexplained illnesses. So thinking about things that we discussed just a moment ago. So things like having a stomach ache very frequently, having a headache. Maybe all of these issues are also having an impact on their sleep. When online or on their phone, they might appear to be anxious or upset, or totally not want to use their devices at all. Their school performance may become suddenly very poor, potentially due to them not being able to fully focus or concentrate within school. You may see some noticeable changes in their emotions. So you might be seeing them becoming more anxious, for example, or lacking in self-confidence and self-esteem. They may come home with missing or damaged possessions, But when you get to that point where your child tells you potentially that they're being bullied or someone's being unkind to them, where do you go from here? Well, firstly, the absolute most important thing to remember is that children who are being bullied will feel that they're lacking in some form of power and control. This really has been taken away from them by that bully. So try and remember that. Try and not go all into the conversation by telling them what you think or what you think you should do or what you think they should do, as this will continue to leave them feeling like they've got no power within that scary and tricky situation. So we recommend that you try and give them some of this power back. So asking them, what do they want to happen or what do they want you to do? If this is the first time they're speaking about it, be prepared for them to tell you that they don't want you to do anything, because acting can feel like a really daunting step. But be reassured that their decision on this really might change. And never do anything without their consent unless you're very, very worried about their safety. We could have a whole 90-minute session on bullying itself, but we want to cover as many topics as we can over the next 2 weeks. So I'm going to park this conversation for now, but a lot of the responses and support to bullying will be part of the same conversations around stress. And as I mentioned, our toolkit will be emailed to you soon, so please do take a look at it. Please do take a look at it. There's lots more in there around kind of understanding and support in regards to bullying. We discuss it a little bit more in depth there. Emma.
Thanks, Chloe. So, what can you do if you notice your child is struggling with anxiety and worries, if life is just getting a bit tough for them? So, firstly, remember that you can make a significant difference by providing that safety, empathy, structure, age appropriate information, comfort, guidance, love, and nurture. It really does have a massive impact on your child's well-being. So, our first bit of advice is to really listen. So, use that active listening. Ask what's wrong and be patient and open, because you might need to ask the question more than once. If you think your child is worried about something, avoid the urge to judge, lecture, or advise them of what they should be doing. The goal here is always to let your child express their concerns and feelings and be heard. So ask questions to help you get the bigger picture. So when they're talking to you, you can say things like, "And what happened next?" And then repeat back what you think your child might have been feeling, along the lines of, "Gosh, that must have been so hard for you," or, "I agree, that sounds really scary." Feeling heard and understood is going to help your child to feel supported, which is especially crucial when times are stressful for them. Try and do this, we call it noticing out loud. So if you see that something seems to be bothering your child, say so and name the feeling that you think your child might be having in that moment. But try and make it in the form of an observation rather than an accusation. So if you consider the difference between, it looks like to me that you're still sad about what happened at the park today, versus, "What's happened now? Are you still upset about what happened at the park?" So you're asking the same question, but the first observation suggests that you want to hear more about your child's concern, and the second comment shuts down a response. So really think here, if you can, about your tone of voice. This allows you the opportunity to show that you care and you want to hear more about the situation. Let your children be problem solvers. So it's natural and part of the job as a parent or carer to want to fix your child's problems. But as Chloe said, when we as adults swoop in to solve every little glitch, we take away our children's control and they don't have a chance to learn those healthy coping skills. Let your children try to solve those low-level problems on their own. Then they'll gain confidence that they can deal with stress and they can deal with setbacks. Try and combat that negative thinking. For example, when they say, I'm terrible at maths, my hair looks rubbish. Children can easily fall into that trap of negative thinking. But when they use this negative self-talk, though, don't just disagree with them and say, no, don't be silly, don't say things like that. Ask them to really think about whether what they say is true, or remind them of the times that they've worked hard and improved and that they're not rubbish or terrible at maths. Learning to frame things positively for them is going to help develop that resilience to stress. And we're going to be coming back to that emotional well-being and self-care next week, when we look at things like body image, etc. So if we go back to Chloe's bullying a minute, God, that made it sound like Chloe was the bully. That's not right. If we go back to the conversation around bullying for a minute, there's a couple more things you can try. Try not to minimize the problem by underreacting or telling your child that he or she is being too sensitive. This is not the time to leave your child alone to plan the next move. They need someone more powerful than the bullies to advocate, help them, hold their hand. And that person really does need to be you. So again, don't blame. If your child is being bullied, please don't ever blame them for what's happening. Don't say, what are you doing to make them pick on you? Or what did you do to get that reaction? You must have said something. There is often no reason for someone to be picked on other than that they are in the line of sight of another child who wants to taunt or hurt them. There's no justification for bullying, and blaming your child will only make them shut down or worse, blame themselves for what happens. Instead, let them know that it's not them. Anyone can be a target. Often it's just a case of wrong place, wrong time, and any kind of difference or vulnerability can do it. You can help your child by having a few practical problem-solving conversations and coming up with strategies together. And here are just a couple that you might want to suggest. So we could suggest that they ignore the bully. As hard as it is for children in this situation, tell your child to try and ignore bullying by either pretending that they don't hear or by keeping a straight face and just not reacting to the taunts. It's often very effective for children to act if they're uninterested in the insults and they refrain from responding to them. This is something you can practice at home with your child. They love acting at this age, so try that role playing the situations that they might face and help them to practice not showing anger or fear. Often our children feel shocked and paralysed when someone calls them a cruel name or hurts them. And if they stand there and take it and they get upset and lose control or start crying, the bullies will have what they want, which is a reaction. The simplest way to change the dynamic is to try and make the bully feel uncomfortable with their own behaviour. So all of us should avoid hitting or fighting back, whether that's verbally or physically, because this is going to cause that bullying to escalate. Discuss with your child trying to say something that's short, simple and neutral. Things like stop, or I've had enough now, or that's not funny can be really effective when they're being bullied. But encourage your child to find sayings that feel right for them. They don't need to insult the other person or get reactive to it, but another good one to be role playing at home. And try and use the buddy system. So, let your child know that there's strength in numbers. When your child is with a friend, it makes it harder to be isolated or targeted by bullies. Encourage their friendships, offer lifts, invite people for tea. You can't make friends for your children, but you can make it easier on them. And if things have escalated to a point where you need to step in and take more efficient action, tell your child that you're going to help and work with them so that the situation doesn't become worse. Remind him or her that it's their right to feel safe at school and decide on the best way to do that together without overreacting or jumping in too quickly. Listen to your child carefully, hear the whole story, ask them how they see it, and ask what would be most helpful. Again, children need to know that somebody more powerful than the bully is on their side. So you know that your children are remarkable at noticing everything. They miss nothing. Have you ever experienced your child parroting back something that you've said, thinking that they didn't hear it? Have you been surprised by them mentioning a topic you thought they didn't know anything about? They pick up on all of these verbal exchanges that you think they don't hear. And even more so, they absorb those feelings that are going on around them. And today there are a whole lot of feelings, aren't there, going on? If we think about the news around Israel and Palestine and the Ukraine right now, some of what's on the news is horrific. And as we as adults might struggle to watch or understand it, imagine how that feels to our children. So you might feel that you're doing a good job in protecting them from this, and I'm sure that you are, but they hear the radio in the car, they see headlines in newspapers in supermarkets, they hear the TV from upstairs. And if you don't explain to them about what's going on, they're going to remain scared and they're going to often fill in these gaps themselves. And often what they're thinking is scarier than the reality. Small doses of real life news is helpful. Large doses, however, can have a negative effect as children can become fixated on a news story and repeatedly want to be looking at news coverage relating to it. So to avoid this overexposure and fixation, encourage them to discuss a news story with you once they've seen it. And this provides a safe space for all of their questions. But at this time, it's quite important to let your children know that they're safe. All children want to know that their parents and carers can keep them safe. And for your younger children, you may have to explain that things like the wars they see on TV are far away because they might think that it's way closer than it is. Emphasize what we can control and the good work that others are doing to help people affected by that situation. And go through all the reasons that mean your children are in a safe place, rather than well-meaningly dismissing their feelings by just telling them that everything is fine. Reassure them that you look after them and that you're going to do your very best to keep them safe. Let them know that it's normal to be concerned, but try telling them that you also find events like this worrying. You want them to leave conversations about things that are happening around them, realizing that though bad things can happen, they don't happen all the time, so they don't need to be scared all the time. And remember, your children they notice when you feel stressed and they're going to react to your emotional state. And as we discussed, children don't always have the emotional intelligence or vocabulary to express themselves. They lack that understanding of what's truly happening. To them, things just feel different, uncomfortable, unpredictable, and scary. So your children learn their coping strategies from you. Never underestimate the influence that you have on your children, especially when you think they're not listening. We're going to share a quick clip with you now about role modelling and how much your children really do copy you. It is an old clip, it's not very long, but it clearly demonstrates the messages that you can give to your children.
Looks like rain again today. Dark clouds gather, fill the sky. Don't know how to talk to you, just know how to say goodbye.
I don't think so. Did you see it back there? Go back where you came from. Go back where you came from. What's wrong with you, Harry? You don't want to sleep. I've had enough.
So powerful clip, and clearly shows one of the best things you can do to help your children with sharing their worries is to adopt your own healthy habits and coping strategies. Life is never going to be 100% easy and happy for our children, so they need to see how to cope when life is tough. It's important to model that healthy coping. You can talk with your children about how you've thought about and dealt with your own stressful situations. So any of you who have done any kind of psychology work or looked at your older children's homework will recognise this pyramid on your screen now as being based on Maslow's hierarchy of need. So Abraham Maslow proposed this theory way back in 1943, but it's still as relevant today as it was then. The idea is the needs lower down this pyramid must be satisfied before we can attend to needs higher up. So if a child's basic needs are not being met, they're going to have little or no opportunity to reach their potential. There's a lot of evidence about why children living in poverty don't do well in school. And actually looking at this, it's obvious, isn't it, that if they're worried where their next meal is going to come from or where they're going to sleep that night, how can they focus on a maths project? So we're just going to take a minute to look at that basic bottom line of the pyramid: food, water, warmth, and rest. So when life is feeling pretty tough for your little ones, you don't always need a magic wand. You just need to go back to basics. Is their favourite breakfast available? Is their bed and duvet clean and comfortable? And this is where nurture plays a huge part in all of this. Little tiny things really do make a huge difference. A very simple thing like making their bed or opening a window in their room can make them feel much better. We all know that feeling of getting into a clean, freshly made bed when you've had a rough day, and our children need that feeling too. And your children still want to spend lots of time with you. Yeah, of course, they're busy with friends, they're busy on their laptops, they're watching the TV, but they're still looking to you for guidance. So role model having water with you, eating healthy food, taking time out to do things that you like, and making your bed in the morning. And many families have found that shared meals have become a luxury that they've lost. You know, sitting around the dining table, if you even have a dining room table, every night as a family can seem sometimes like something out of an old storybook. Some of the reason is just pace of life. You might have got older children as well that you're ferrying to clubs. You've got so many competing demands at work and home that it might be hard to find an hour each evening when you can all be together. So take that pressure off yourselves. Maybe try and eat once a week as a family. It's still going to have a huge impact. Try and find that one night a week and commit to it. Ask a different member of the family each week to plan the meal. Get them to plan the shopping list, to lay the table, to help with the preparation. You know, that shared responsibility. Why must it all be down to you? You're supposed to be a team in your family. TikTok is full of great recipe ideas that your child might want to share with you. But even 3 or 4 different microwave meals sat on the sofa eating at the same time really is something. Because one of the positive side effects of eating together is it allows everyone there to feel valued and appreciated. This is another core need for children. They need to know that you've managed to find an hour to give them. It's that emotional warmth that they're looking for. So we've started tonight by talking about stress and how it affects our children and what you can do to help. So we're going to end this section with just a short clip about stress and the brain. This is a good one to share with your children if you feel it's appropriate. It just sums up a little bit about what we've been talking about.
Did you know that your emotions come from your brain? There's no such thing as a bad emotion. Every emotion, like happy, sad, angry, or anxious, has an important role to play. Everyone has emotions, kids, teenagers, and adults. Emotions can help us work out how to respond or behave in different environments and situations. Sometimes our emotions can get really big. They can start to bubble up and up until they come out quickly in ways that are not very kind or helpful to ourselves and others. We might feel so frustrated or angry that we react by screaming at someone, even though it could get us into trouble or hurt their feelings. We may feel so overwhelmed with how hard our homework is that we might throw it away or run into our room crying. By understanding how our brains work, we can begin to understand our emotions. Then we can learn ways to help calm down big emotions and express them in more helpful and positive ways. The brain can be tough to understand, so let's break it down into three main parts that help guide our emotions. The first part of our brain is our smart brain, also known as our frontal lobe. Our smart brain helps us with things like reading, writing, solving problems, thinking clearly, and even with how we communicate. The second part of our brain is our emotional brain. The emotional brain is in charge of the storing and sorting of emotions and memories. The third part of our brain is the survival brain, also known as our brain stem. This part of the brain is responsible for our body's basic functions, things like our breathing, heart rate, movement, sleep, and more. It can help our bodies respond quickly in dangerous situations to help keep us safe. But when we feel really strong emotions, our smart brain can go temporarily offline. This is so our emotional brain can focus on sending messages to our survival brain to respond as quickly as it can to help keep us safe. This can be really helpful for keeping us safe when we're in danger, like if we came across a bear and our body needed to respond quickly without having time for the smart brain to think it through. But our brain can't always tell the difference between danger and when we're just feeling really big emotions, like stress. So while the smart brain turning off can be really helpful in certain situations, like needing to run away quickly from a bear or an angry dog, it wouldn't be so helpful in times when we have big emotions. In those times, we need our smart brain to help us think clearly, like when we have a test coming up or have to give a speech. A big part of being able to manage our emotions is learning how to notice when our smart brain is about to switch off and finding out what we can do to keep the smart brain switched on. Our brain has evolved to help us stay safe from danger. When our brain is really stressed and thinks we're in danger, it tries to keep us safe by triggering a response called fight, flight, freeze. This is our brain's natural reaction to danger. For example, if you came across a bear and felt in danger, your smart brain will go temporarily offline and your emotional and survival brains will take charge. This is because if a bear was about to attack you, you wouldn't need to know what kind of bear it is. Your body just needs to respond quickly to keep you safe. You might try to attack the bear. That's a fight response. You might try to run away and hide from the bear. That's flight. Or you might stay perfectly still and try not to move and hope the bear doesn't see you. That's freeze. We live in a world that's full of stress, so our brain can't always tell the difference between day-to-day stress and stress because we're in danger. Stuff like homework, fighting with friends, or public speaking can still trigger our fight, flight, freeze response, even if we're not in any physical danger. Like if you're feeling stressed because of a speech you have to do at school, you might feel like yelling or screaming. That's your fight response. You might want to run off stage and hide. That's your flight response. Or you might freeze in place and not be able to get the words out. That's your freeze response. The good news is that there are lots of things we can do to help calm these big feelings down and keep the smart brain switched on. Tip 1. If you can learn how to calm down your body, this can help to calm down your survival brain. You can do this by doing physical things like taking deep breaths, going for a run, or having a shower. Tip 2. Calming down your thoughts can help calm down your emotional brain. You can do things like meditation, mindfulness, or activities that use your 5 senses. Tip 3. Keep your smart brain switched on. do things your smart brain is good at, like communicating with a trusted adult, talking to a counsellor, reading a book, or writing your thoughts down. Calming yourself down takes practice. So, to get really good at managing those big emotions, you have to keep practicing.
Okay, thank you, Emma. So a bit of a change of pace now to look at some risks that your children will be increasingly subjected to. So try not to be scared to talk to your children about drugs, alcohol, smoking, and vaping. There's a real common misconception that if we talk to our children too early about something, they're more likely to do it. But this really isn't the case. If you're able to talk to your child about it and the risks involved, you're arming them with the power to make their own decisions. And we all know, don't we, that simply telling a child not to do something won't work. So knowledge really is power here. So how can we start to have those conversations about drugs, alcohol, vaping and smoking? Well, you could start by finding out what they know about it already, or maybe their thoughts on it. So have they learned much about it in school, for example? Arm yourself with the knowledge too, in case they have any questions. The good news from Public Health England is that there is an ongoing downward trend in alcohol consumption amongst those aged under 16. But there is very little research so far about the impact that vaping has on our health, and it's absolutely okay to tell them that. Tell them about their grandparents who used to go to the GP surgery and have their doctor smoke in the same room as them. Tell them about how people used to smoke in pubs when you were younger. Tell them that we also used to know very little about smoking and just how quickly research and education can change. Your children may talk about illegal drugs way before you think they may. A lot of very young children will, for example, recognise the smell of cannabis in the street, having never been exposed to it at home, but just by picking up on those conversations around this when it happens. They also think that pretending to know certain things make them look cool. If you overhear a conversation about drugs and you're not sure what they're talking about, find out. www.talktofrank really is a great website for drug information. Drugs change names over the years and come in and out of fashion, and the response that we have to them also changes. Talk to Frank has the most up-to-date information for you, so make sure that you know more about something than your child does. For instance, the latest craze for teenagers seems to be NOS, also known as nitrous oxide or laughing gas. This really is relatively cheap and easy to buy, easy to store and hide, and seemingly quite innocent. Ever suck the helium from a balloon, for example? It gives you that same kind of lightheaded, giggly feeling that only lasts for 1 or 2 minutes. We are starting to see lots of used canisters now on the streets, and the long-term effects of this are only now starting to be seen. It is a very dangerous substance, but one that will look and seem very light and fun to younger children, especially as within only the last few weeks, it has become illegal. So have that conversation as soon as you can so that your children are armed with information. But again, role modelling. Role modelling really is the best way to get consistent and safe messages to your children. So if you don't want them to vape and smoke, do try giving up yourself if you do vape or smoke. And while I'm not suggesting here that as a responsible adult, you can't ever drink alcohol, maybe we could all think about the message that we give when we do drink. So does your child see you coming home after a tough day at work and heading straight to the fridge to pour a glass of wine with that sigh saying, "Oh, I needed this," giving a clear message that alcohol will take away stress? Do they hear you moaning that you're having to drive somewhere so you won't be able to have a drink and just how annoying this is? It's not just what or how much you're drinking. It's about what children associate alcohol with, such as emotions and occasions. So let children know, and do remember that actions speak louder than words, that alcohol isn't needed to have fun and not a solution to a problem. This should help prevent them from relating alcohol to feeling sad or feeling stressed, but will also help them to build their confidence to say no if they ever feel pressure to drink. Talk about alcohol when it comes up naturally. So, for example, if you're watching TV and you see an advert for alcohol, you can ask your child if they know how drinking alcohol affects the body, but keep that information simple. Children at this age can hear about the effects of alcohol and why it's dangerous for growing bodies and minds. You can talk about what happens when someone is drunk, so think about things like distorted vision and coordination, altered perceptions and impaired judgment, which can lead to accidents and other risky behaviours. Talk about the horrible things like bad breath, being sick, horrible hangovers, and that memory loss or regret. In reality, like I said, you're unlikely to stop your children ever trying alcohol, but just make sure that they have the facts. Share your concerns with them and make it an ongoing and open conversation. So a tougher subject coming up now, and one where you may be thinking again that you don't need to know this, but yet you really do. Back to that preparation and knowledge being really so important. We want to look tonight at ways in which your child may be exploited. Although the types of exploitation and the language we use can change, the basic premise always stays the same. Exploitation is an adult targeting a child and abusing their power for their own needs. Whether it's sexual exploitation, labour exploitation, or criminal exploitation in county lines, your children should never be blamed for the abuse they experience. Your child's behaviour and the responses are not the crime. We should never be victim blaming. Child exploitation really is always a crime. Emma.
Thanks, Chloe. So you have probably heard the expression county lines from the news, from social media, or from safety campaigns, etc. And your children might already have had some information about it from school. But as parents and carers, you might not have had much detail shared with you, yet you're the frontline security in protecting your family from this type of exploitation. So county lines is the police term that is used to describe gangs who supply drugs to suburban areas, to market and coastal towns, and they do this by using mobile phones. So these organised crime networks exploit children and young people to store, move, sell and deliver drugs, often travelling across counties. So they use younger children because they are cheap, they're easily controlled, and they are less likely to be picked up by the police. So no one really knows how many young people across the country are being forced to take part, but the Children's Commissioner estimates that there are at least 46,000 children in England. No, that's not 46,000, 460,000 children in England who are involved in some kind of gang activity. So this really is a growing concern for all of our children. Please don't be drawn into that false sense of security. It's just those who already live in challenging situations or areas, because this really can and does affect any family. However, particularly vulnerable children and young people, for example, those who are homeless or living in care or have special educational needs or mental health problems, are often especially targeted by these gangs, and they're often recruited by social media. So gangs look for children with that emotional vulnerability as well, such as those experiencing problems at home, absent or busy parents, and then the gangs are going to seek to fill that emotional gap and become the child's new family to be able to take advantage of them. And then these children are groomed, threatened, or tricked into trafficking drugs for gangs who often use intimidation or violence or will threaten that child's family. So county lines is an issue that can lead to serious physical and emotional harm to our children. We are seeing younger and younger children being approached to carry drugs and knives. And this is because, like we said, they are much less likely to be stopped by the police and they are easier to coerce and threaten. There are now cases of 5 and 6-year-olds in larger cities such as Manchester and London being recruited and targeted. And Devon, as we know, usually follows these trends a few years later. The Children's Society website tells the harrowing story of a 7-year-old with £1,000 of drug debt and a threat on his life. Gangs like new recruits, children without any criminal history. And they refer to these children as clean skins, young people with no prior police involvement, often from families not involved with any agencies. Probably your children. Police don't generally suspect young children in school uniform of dealing drugs. And as well as being used to transport drugs, county lines gangs may also sexually abuse and exploit children of any gender. And this can happen through children being groomed into what they believe is a romantic relationship with a gang member, which then leads to exploitation. We also need to understand that sometimes gangs are attractive and exciting to our children initially. If we think about movies such as The Fast and the Furious or games that they play online on their Xbox, gangs are often portrayed as glamorous and edgy, all those things that are attractive to our children. And this is another reason that games and films have that age-appropriate guidance. At this age, it really is still difficult for our children to decide what is real and what is not. And that's why that guidance is there for you as parents. You know your child's level of understanding when you're buying and deciding which games they can play. And sexual exploitation is also used in gangs to exert power and control over members or to initiate young people into gangs. They might also offer something in return for the child's cooperation. For example, money, food, alcohol, clothes, jewellery. But these gifts will usually be manipulated so that the child feels that they're in debt to the gang and they've got no choice but to do what they want. And once a child is part of a County Lines gang, their loyalty and commitment will be tested. The gang will begin to trap the child by making them feel powerless to leave. And this might include threats of violence if they leave, making the child feel like they're betraying their new family, or telling the child that they'll get into trouble if they seek help because they've committed a criminal offence. I don't know if any of you watch Hollyoaks, but they did a fantastic storyline a few years ago that showed how easily an average child can be forced into delivering drugs. Give it a watch if you can. Probably not one for your little ones to watch, but a really good awareness raising video for you. If you just type Ella and Juliet drugs into YouTube, then it should come up. And also, if you wanted more information about County Lines and how to protect your children, again, pop St Giles Trust into Google and there is some brilliant information about their SOS project. The trust is run by former gang members who really know what's going on in the world. So that's another good one for you to take a look at. So scary stuff. And how can you protect your family from this kind of threat? Well, just by being here tonight, you already are, because remember that knowledge gives you power. You might not be concerned right now for your younger children, but what about their older siblings or other family members or friends? Maybe your children are regularly babysat by an older friend or cousin, and you may be concerned about them. So the list on your screen now is something that was put together by the Ministry of Justice about signs that parents, carers and professionals can be looking out for that may signify involvement in gangs or other forms of exploitation. We do discuss this further in our teenage toolkit, and the NSPCC website has some great guidance, again, should you want to look at this in more detail. Sexual exploitation, I get, is a really scary thought for you as parents and carers. And again, don't wait until the teenage years to start talking about this. We're going to talk a lot more next week about grooming, relationships and consent. But whilst we're looking at ways our children can be targeted, we just want to share another clip with you.
must be clothed and last broth. Come on, puppy.
Where's Niall?
He's at home with some pizza.
Okay, so quite an eye-opening, scary clip, and it feels like a really appropriate time to touch upon social media. So social media can be defined as a website or an application that enables users to create and share content or to participate in social networking. So this includes all of those apps that you know. So think about TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, now known as X, Be Real. The list really does go on and on. I'd take a guess that very few or maybe even none of us had social media when we were the same age as our children. But how many of you here tonight allow your children on social media? How many of your children own phones, laptops or tablets, for example? And how many of your children access your phone, normally when they're bored, as you're sat waiting for an appointment somewhere? We know that most of the guidance recommends that children under the age of 13 years old do not access most of these sites, but I can also tell you that nearly 1/3 of parents with children aged between 7 to 9 reported that their children use social media apps. And we know that 93% of young people aged between 13 and 18 use social media. There's no formal diagnosis for social media addiction, but it is being recognised that overuse of social media can impact on our health and our well-being. For example, 40% of teenagers state that they feel anxious if they haven't checked social media for 2 hours whilst they're awake. The online world really does change so quickly that any information that we give you tonight about privacy settings, firewalls, or parental locks, for example, may well be outdated by tomorrow. So the top sites for keeping up to date with information are up on your screen now, with real useful things to know. There are many positives and many negatives to the online world. I can't remember how we ever booked tickets, looked at holiday destinations, or even drove anywhere without it. How did we know what was happening in the world about social media? But social media is here and it's here to stay, and a lot of our children want to use it. So the secret is about finding a happy balance and a healthy balance and helping our children to do that too. So we've had lots of discussions tonight about those conversations, and the same goes for social media. Open up that conversation at home. It's so easy to say things like you're always on your phone. By using language like this, it might make our children close down and be less open about social media due to that fear of punishment. Do try and take that inquisitive approach with them by asking general questions about social media, like that sounds interesting, what are you watching? Or asking about who their favourite influencer is, for example. This could lead on to a conversation about how social media is a space, and it's down to the user to make sure that that's a positive space. So if you are aware of what they're watching or listening to, it will help them to come to you if they do see anything scary or anything that they're unsure of. It is absolutely okay to set some boundaries, house rules, for example, about social media, but make sure that you follow these too. For example, you could introduce a tech-free mealtime where no one goes on their phones or iPad while eating. Or you could introduce a family games night, for example, with the rule being no phones, no technology allowed. It's really important that children at this age have enough rest and downtime from electronics. There is a lot of evidence about how disruptive our phones are, even if by our bedside and even if when on silent. they can be really quite disruptive to our sleep and to our children's sleep. A good rule to follow as soon as your children start having phones is that they go on charge at a certain time each evening in a particular room, for example, the kitchen. A little bit of that out of sight, out of mind. And remember the role modelling that we talked about. How many of us take our phones to bed? It may be that you absolutely have good reason for this. Teenagers out later than us, work commitments, but make sure that you explain why you are having those different rules. Otherwise, it can become trickier later on as they get older. We have spoken about role modelling a lot, but there really is a reason for that. Children absolutely learn how to behave by watching you and watching how you behave. So keep your own privacy settings up to date and show your young person how to stay on top of theirs. You can even ask them to check out your privacy settings. Even younger children are often very, very tech savvy, and helping you with this will role model to them the importance of privacy and give them some ownership that they have taught you something, even if you knew it already. Try and think before you post and show them that you're thinking about that. For example, you could say something like, I really like this photo of me, but you can clearly see our house in the background, so that wouldn't be great to post online. Let's all try and ask ourselves as well if our comment is constructive before we post. Let's not try and hide behind our profile pictures. Let's help our children to realise that social media absolutely is not anonymous. Explain to your child that their online reputation will stay with them for a very long time, potentially even for the rest of their life. So if you wouldn't say something to someone's face, don't say it to them online. Talk about who you connect with on social media and who you don't. For example, you might want to give yourself a rule. If I stop and say hi to them in the street, then I'll add them on Facebook. This helps to demonstrate those boundaries in the online world to our young people. Find topics your family are interested in and talk about it. Take that conversation online, maybe by commenting on a group or a page about the topic, and show your young person how to connect with others safely and respectfully on the issues that they care about, and demonstrate having those respectful conversations online. And do try and respect their boundaries too. They might not want to be your friend, or they might not want to follow you, or for you to follow them, on social media. But when they're younger, you may want to have this as a deal breaker for them using social media. But this doesn't necessarily mean that they're posting worrying things. It might just mean that they want some privacy. Just like they probably wouldn't like you sat in the corner whilst they have their friends around. If you are their friend on social media, do try and resist commenting or liking everything on their page, as this might feel a little bit overpowering. And if anything does really worry you about what they're doing online, or you disagree with something that they've put online, make sure to take this conversation offline and have a conversation about this face-to-face, rather than via the comments or the messages. If you look at the NSPCC website, which will be flashing up at the end of tonight's session, they have something called Build and Talk, which uses Lego to help with difficult conversations about online safety. Definitely worth a look at if your children enjoy Lego. But there are obviously other ways in which your children can be exploited. So another tough subject coming up, but an important one. So do mute us for 5 minutes if it's too tough for you.
Thanks, Chloe. So we are going to spend just a few minutes talking about pornography. So like Chloe said, do mute us if you think this will be a difficult subject for you. So research shows us that anyone on the internet can be 6 clicks or less away from seeing inappropriate or harmful content online. Try it out. Type in something totally appropriate that your child might search for, follow the links and see where it takes you. So research commissioned by a children's safety group showed the strength of these algorithms that are used by social media companies, the ones that are based on a user's activity. So for example, if you think about your Facebook or your Twitter and the kind of adverts that come up, they are targeted at you based on your previous searches. So whilst a teenage boy just Googling random stuff may be targeted with age appropriate material, such as college courses or sportswear, he's also likely to be targeted with highly sexual content just because he's a teenage boy. So your 8-year-old clicking on a recipe that's labelled healthy eating follows the next link might be targeted with diet tips. The next link and the next link after that might lead them to an eating disorder, which will then totally distort their image of a healthy body and that isn't what they were looking for. So Bernardo's reports that the average age for a child's first exposure to the things that you're looking at on your screen now is 11, with the youngest exposure being as early as 5. So we try and protect our children all the time, don't we, from drugs and you can't buy cigarettes, alcohol, or even paracetamol in some shops without proving your age. But approximately only 3% of pornographic websites require you to prove your age before viewing. And a huge 45% of these sites do not even include any adult content warning. This makes it very easy for your child to stumble into a pornography site by accident. Last year, there was a media storm when a popular alphabet song targeted at very young children became a Minnie Mouse porn film in just 12 lead clicks from a YouTube video. So in 2018, the Internet Watch Foundation removed over 105,000 web pages showing sexual abuse of children. And the online porn industry is suggested to be worth over £97 billion. So protecting your children is not top of that industry's priorities. And of course, your children may also deliberately search for pornographic content. They can do this for various reasons. And remember that it is perfectly normal for them to be curious about bodies, sex and relationships. Sometimes they might look online to find answers to questions they're too embarrassed to ask. But exposure to pornographic content harms children. Exposure to pornography at a young age can lead to poor mental health, sexism, objectification, sexual violence, and many other negative outcomes. Among other risks, when children view pornography, they may come to view such behaviour that they're witnessing as normal and acceptable. And it's hard to think, isn't it, about how something that your child sees at age 7 might have terrible consequences later on in his or her relationship. Especially 20 years on from now, that may still be having an impact. And that's the reality when we talk about pornography. And with the best will in the world, it's so hard to protect your children from online dangers. Yep, you can look at parental controls, you can look at blocking of websites, but if they really wanted to find something, they will. There are literally hundreds of sites around for them to fall into. And there are also hundreds of sites that we can direct you to around online safety. Just type it into Google or YouTube, but their friend's phone or laptop may not have the same safety features. So there's not a lot you can do about stopping them accessing this totally. So it's all a bit scary, isn't it? And you might be feeling a bit powerless about what you can do, but we're going to go straight back to basics again to finish. All of these conversations may well feel awkward and embarrassing, but if they can't talk to you, they're going to talk to somebody else. We've heard that the average age of a child viewing their first online pornography is 11, so you can never have these conversations too early. Please don't let that awkwardness build up until it becomes a taboo subject that you can't broach. If you've managed to build a safe and open relationship at home, then your child may come to you with questions way earlier than you expect them to. They might start by asking where babies come from, and this is a really good starting point because we're not looking for one big sex conversation. We're looking for an open, ongoing approach. Don't tell them off if you find that they've accessed porn. Do not instantly take away their device as a punishment. Try to be casual, give some age-appropriate answers, but it's still okay to say that some things are for adults. Remember what they have seen might have scared them. Looking at things that are on your screen now, none of that is nice for children to see. And they're going to have really confusing emotions after seeing explicit sexual content. Be reassuring, tell them it's okay to be curious and it's a normal part of growing up, but also be prepared to challenge views that may have arisen from watching this adult content. Reinforce the message that sex and bodies that they're seeing in porn are not realistic. We really wouldn't want our children's first impression of sex to be as distorted as we know porn can be, but your 7-year-old won't be able to work out that what they're seeing is not normal. Start conversations as early as you possibly can. Use the correct words for body parts to avoid any confusion. Start conversations as early as you can so that there are no blurring of lines, and encourage them to respect their own and other people's bodies. And we're going to pick this up again with you all next week about how to have those tricky, embarrassing conversations about sex, relationships and consent. Chloe.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you all for sticking with us after some really tough conversations tonight. So just to finish tonight, we want to go back to basics again. Don't ever feel that as a parent you cannot make a difference to any of this. You absolutely can, and this age is the perfect age to do it. The most important message we hope you'll take away tonight is to really make sure that you know your child. Then you'll be able to spot if anything is different than usual. Remember, a day at school can be as tiring for your child as a day at work for you. We appreciate it's hard, but just finding 5 to 10 minutes of one-to-one time really can make the world of difference. Show an interest in what your child has to say. This will let your child know that they are important to you. Try and stick to routines and visit familiar places which give your child security. They'll be introduced to so many new challenges and will take comfort in the safety of things they feel familiar with. Try to make time for play, but also make it work for you when things get busy. Get them to help you with simple tasks like tidying up, putting away clothes or laying up the table. Maybe do this to music, make it a little bit fun, do it while singing. There are tremendous benefits to asking your child questions that require more than yes or no answers. Doing so helps to develop their language, communication and critical thinking. Open-ended conversations also foster creativity, self-esteem and confidence. And as we keep saying, a strong bond with our children really is key to their healthy development and emotional well-being. You can ask your child about anything in the past, their present day-to-day life or the future, and you can ground your questions in reality or fantasy. They can be silly, serious or somewhere in between. You can follow their lead by asking them questions that they ask you. If they ask your opinion on something, simply turn it around. What do you think? If they love superheroes, football or even Harry Styles? Ask some questions related to those passions. And finally, remember that power of a hug. Giving another person a hug and holding on for 20 seconds really does have amazing benefits. A hug releases serotonin and oxytocin, which are the love hormones which help relieve stress and boost well-being. So a final thank you. Thank you so much for coming along to the session tonight. It really has been great having you all here with us, and we really hope that you can take away something useful from this session tonight. Do try and talk to your family about the things that we've discussed tonight, and it might not feel like much, but those extra 10 minutes of quality time really can make such a difference. Remember, you will never get this time with your child again, so do try and enjoy some of it. Children are totally amazing, but as we keep saying, parenting is so hard. So look after yourself too. You cannot pour from an empty cup. We hope that you'll be able to join us again next week. Please do sign up if you haven't already. We'll be looking at relationships, and that includes friendships and unhealthy relationships. We'll be looking at healthy development and language, which follows on from the exploitation conversation. And we'll be looking at stereotypes, positive talk and emotional well-being. Also, if you would like a CPD certificate for tonight, please do email Claire, whose address is in the chat bar. And if you can give us some feedback from tonight's session, we would really appreciate it. We really do want to be able to provide these sessions again, so your opinion really does count. And any services that we've discussed tonight will have their details in the toolkit. Please do follow us on Instagram and Facebook so that we can keep you up to date with any upcoming events or local services. And a final thank you. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, and we really do appreciate you finding this hour. We'll let you get on with your evening now, so do take care, and we hope to see you again next week. Goodbye.